The following program is brought to you in part by the film Backdoor Channels, The Price of Peace.
I had the ability to enter into the American Embassy at any time. I had letters from the President of the United States that I had the ability to get on the red phone to the White House and to the special room that they have in the White House where it's all secret. And I could tell Sam Lewis to please leave his office. And he would get crazy. I mean, but how can I refute it? I'm there by virtue of the order of the President of the United States. When you go into an embassy, you know, the Marines are there, they put the guns down, they think you're attacking. Then I bring out a letter from the President of the United States, and all of a sudden I get salutes. And I would come in, I'd say, Mr. Ambassador, I said, I need your office. And his secretary looked at me with eyes like daggers. And then I said, please shut the door. And then I would call the President, tell him certain things that I need to tell him. It's called the Situation Room. It's not CNN, but it's the real Situation Room. And I would talk to the President and tell him certain things that would, you know, be conveyed on a secret telephone. And we knew that the Russians were listening to most every conversation. And usually when I talked to Lipschitz, I talked in codes. And if I talked to Weitzman from the United States, I would talk in codes. What I found out, coincidentally, when I worked on a hostage crisis for President Carter, when I flew to Austria, I met the representative of the PLO years later, and he told me that he knew all about my trip, and he was my shadow. He was shadowing me at that time. Hassan Rahman was his name. And so you never know. You don't know. But everybody listens to everybody out there. And you have to bear that in mind whenever you speak. And never talk in toilets. There was a period where we thought the whole accord was falling apart. And there was a suggestion that I go see Begin. It's around Hanukkah time or Christmas time. And the president thought that I should go over, and I got a call from Yonah Klimovitsky, who was Menachem Begin's personal secretary, telling me that Begin was really upset about what was going on, and maybe I should come over. So I called Lipschitz and told him I was going over there, and I guess he told Carter, and I told Carter, said, please convey special greetings for Hanukkah to Menachem Begin and tell him we appreciate everything he's doing. When I sat with Begin, he was furious. He said, Secretary of Vance. Vance means, it's a Jewish word for like a tail. It's a funny description, Vance. Secretary of Vance. I think he's anti-Semitic. And we can't get along with what he's doing. And you must tell the president that we have to get him out of this because we can't agree to the things that he wants to do. So I conveyed all this to the president through Bob Lipschitz. But the irony is, in March, when the Camp David Treaty was signed and we had a huge reception, probably the most famous White House dinner in the history of the United States, or at least for the 20th century, Begin gets up and says, never in the history of the Jewish people had we had a better Secretary of State than Secretary Vance, and never in the history have we had a better president than President Carter. And Weitzman's looking at me, and I look at him and I say, man, this is sure politics. 3 months before, he's practically calling Vance an anti-Semite, and now he's telling him he's the greatest president, greatest Secretary of State in the world. So if you don't become cynical after that, I don't know how you become cynical. But the truth was, we had a great dinner, and we all celebrated, and we had peace with Egypt. The settlements were always a huge issue. But after that, there were two issues that were left. Israel had been giving up oil reserves, and they wanted to know how and where they would get their oil. They were nervous about that. And there were some liaisons that had to be established in Gaza. There was no clarity on it. But Israel was being funded very largely. They needed to get more money, as I told you before, for those airfields that they were giving up, and they did get it. If you would ask the Israelis, I think they would probably say maybe Brzezinski, he always looked like he was very tough on the issues. Mondale was very helpful. He was vice president. But I would say that in my dealings, everybody seemed to really want to be helpful. I didn't run. I had clearance from the President of the United States. You have to understand, when you have that type of clearance, nobody can touch you. If the president wants you, he gets you. I remember going through customs, and I had to meet the president quickly. I had a letter that got me through customs in about 6 seconds. I mean, the power of the presidency is humongous. It's enormous. I mean, so I don't know who could be difficult. Bill Quandt worked at the National Security Agency, National Security Council, rather. He was always lugubrious. He never thought this thing would happen. Jody Powell sometimes was lugubrious. Hamilton Jordan was more upbeat. But personally, I can't say anybody got into my way, because I had this great road to the president. Probably unusual in American history, or I don't know. I mean, we should do a study on this. I suppose there are great backdoor channels throughout history, but I had no problem with anybody. Begin had strong convictions, and although he looks like, a poor European Jew, had a lot of obstinance in him and a lot of pride for the Jewish people. I don't think I meant personal pride. He had pride of the Jewish people, which I explained to you before. When he went on television, he put on a yarmulke, or a head covering, and talked about Tisha B'Av. He went on Sunday news programs. The same thing happened with Yitzhak Rabin. He was a prime minister, and I had passed a message to him. I was very friendly with the people around him, that he should convey to the American public that he's a Jewish Israeli prime minister, and that he should really talk about Tisha B'Av, which is a sad day in Jewish history. And Rabin didn't. He ignored it. So when you contrast the Sabra, he was born in Israel, Rabin, versus the Polish Jew who emigrated to Israel and worked in the Irgun, his pride was that it was for the people of Israel who established themselves. It was not for his personal pride. He was a guerrilla fighter, fighting for the independence of Israel. There's a big dispute. There was a very tough group called the Stern Gang, and it was they were the toughest guys against the British. But if you refer to them as the gang, there are many people in the United States today that get totally offended, Jewish people, and they like to be referred to as the group, the Stern Group. So it's a question of definition of how you. I think that a terrorist has no compunction about who he's killing and would give no advance warning. when Begin blew up the King David Hotel, he gave advance warning to the British, and he wanted to make sure that there were no women and children there. So I think there's a huge distinction between a terrorist and a guerrilla fighter, and I think Begin was not a terrorist, but basically a guerrilla fighter. If you have two good hotels, probably it's going to happen in the city, you know. Yeah, of course, there's a little bit of irony. I mean, that hotel's been a place of great history, and Carter stayed there during that period when he came over. So, yeah, sure, it's ironic. It's a historic place, the King David Hotel. That's where the British elite stayed before the partitioning of Palestine. Bob Lipschitz called me. It was all over the radio, but Lipschitz called me, and I heard, and I think Shimon Peres told me. I was meeting with Shimon Peres at that time, and he said, you know, your president is coming to Israel. And I forgot all about this. Peres asked me to brief him as to what I think Carter was going to do, what his thinking was. He was debriefing me all day, and I said, you know, Shimon, if I know, I can't tell you. I'm not sure I know, and what I know I probably am not going to talk about. That's ironic. I forgot all about that. And I think he's the guy that told me that the president was coming here. And Peres really wanted to know, you know, what I thought, which way it was going to go, what's he thinking, is it going to happen, which I don't blame him for. But at that point, what could I tell him? He was in the opposition at that time. I think he probably knew more than most people thought he knew. And he also done polling. I had found out later the CIA had done some polling for him, and he knew that most people would accept the peace treaty. I think that was his trump card. You don't pre-approve. You probably poll your ministers and see if they would vote for it. But I think you have to first bring it to them. So my guess is that he probably had a good guess that. Well, Begin told me, by the way, when I visited him that Hanukkah Christmas time, that I should tell the president that he can control his cabinet and he can get this thing through if it's done correctly. He said, I have the power to move the government in favor of a peace treaty. He told me that, and I was probably told that to Carter. We ate. We had dinner. We talked about what was going on. What we did do is get clearance. It was very hard to get Secret Service clearance. So Lipschitz had to arrange for me to have a special, very special badge that I could enter any part of the premises of the King David Hotel, even to the president's room or whatever. And there was a friend of mine there who was the military attaché, Bruce, I forgot his name, Bruce Williams. He took care of getting me those security badges. I wish I'd shaved them. They were interesting. And we discussed what we needed to do in order to move the process further. I think Lipschitz came in on a Thursday or a Friday, I don't remember. But and I had a secret, not a secret, a special car assigned to me by the American government, which gave me the ability to ride any place I wanted, gave me clearances. I was VIP'd all the way. I remember traveling on the Tel Aviv road to Jerusalem, no traffic. I was the only car allowed on the road. I had a special envoy and car take me to the old Hilton Hotel where Weitzman was sitting, because the treaty that night looked like it was falling apart. And Lipschitz was in a bedroom at the King David Hotel about 30 yards from the president. That night, when Carter was there, it looked like everything was falling apart. And that was a very dramatic night. And they dispatched me to go see Ezer Weitzman, because Carter had addressed the Knesset that day A woman, Geulah Cohen, had admonished him for, she was a very right-wing Knesset member. Her son today is Tzachi Negbi. He's a minister in the Olmert government, but the mother was pretty tough, nearly insulting to Carter at the Knesset, and everybody was embarrassed about it. And I moved downstairs, and it's quite interesting. All the press were there, and Blitzer was standing behind the ropes asking me if I can give him a scoop as to what's really going to happen. I couldn't talk to him. I was on my way, flying out of the hotel to get to Weitzman. Jody Powell thought that he had prepared a statement saying it was going to be a failure. Hamilton Jordan thought that it couldn't be saved. Bill Quant, who was never my best friend, said, "Leon, you're the only guy who can save it. You got to do something. You got to really save it." I remember it's pretty heady stuff at that point. So I flew to Weissman's house, literally. They took me in a car with a special police escort to get to him because it was dramatic, because Carter wanted to leave, and he adjourned his leaving. And when a president adjourns his leaving, the whole world stops, and he gave it another 12 hours. And there was a problem there with ambassadors, and another problem, I forgot exactly the issues, but I had proposed that they sign an agreement and agree on the issues that they didn't agree on, just so that there wouldn't be a failure here. And ultimately we came up with, I think it was the oil. They were very worried about oil. And we came up with the fact that Egypt would supply Israel oil at $25 a barrel. And the next morning we all had breakfast. Carter got that news. He took it with him to Egypt. Sadat agreed, and we had a treaty. That night was perilous. Lipschitz said, "What can we do?" We were sitting around there, and I said, "Well, let me go see Weitzman." He said, "It's a good idea." So they call up the Secret Service. They say, "Get a car ready. Charney has to go to see Weitzman." So they get a car and a police escort, and I get to Weitzman. Weitzman's staying on the other side of town at the old the Jerusalem Hilton. And I go to Weitzman and go to his room. He's sitting there with his wife. He looks terrible, and he's upset to the wall. He's cursing people in his cabinet, cursing this guy, cursing that guy. How could this happen? We're so close, we're so this. And I calmed him down. I said, "Okay, Asa, let's get to the issues. Let's see what the issues is." "Well, it's this freaking oil and this and that and that." I said, "Why don't we set up a guarantee for the oil? Ask the Egyptians to guarantee our oil." "All right, that's a good idea. Can we try it?" And there was another issue. I had forgotten. I sped back to the King David Hotel, told him that Weissman was very discouraged and that he was upset that I should apologize to the president for the behavior of the Knesset and Geulah Cohen's behavior, and these people really don't want peace. They don't know if they want to live in peace. They don't know what they want. He was going nuts. So I conveyed that, but I try to stay on focus on issues. And Jimmy Breslin was there. He was a reporter, and he thought, everybody was asking me if I thought this thing was going to collapse, what did I think, could I do it? I was a little bit of the middle guy there. Everybody thought I had all the information because everybody knew I was very close with Weitzman, and they knew probably a little bit with Carter. And I remember everybody thinking that this thing is really going down. And then the next morning at breakfast, there was a buzz that Carter had accepted some of the ideas and he was going to go see Sadat that afternoon. And we were all hopeful. We were glued to telephones and radios to see if he would succeed. And then we got the news that Sadat accepted these two problems that were on the table, and we had a treaty. Jerusalem was shut down. You couldn't move. I mean, the president, his entourage were the only people that could move around there. and you needed really perimeter security, special security, CIA, I don't know, you had all kinds of security badges, and anybody who had entrance to the King David Hotel had to have ultra high security badges that you couldn't get 5 blocks near the place. And there were some guys there, I remember some Jewish leaders who wanted to be machers, and they were Republicans. And they said to me, how do we get involved in this? We want to be part of this whole tree. And I said, now you want to get involved? It's the end of the day, and there's no place for you guys. It was ironic to me. I don't want to mention names, but I'll never forget it. And then I remember when I was rushing to see Weitzman, Blitzer was behind the ropes as a reporter at that time for the Jerusalem Post, and saying to me, can you tell me anything? And I said, Wolf, I've got nothing to tell you. The one thing I did with Blitzer, by the way, in our friendship, every time I met or did something very instructive or constructive with the White House, Blitzer would keep a diary of it, but we had a deal he could never publicize it, and he kept his word to the T. But I used to tell him certain things that I wouldn't tell anybody else, but he could never publish. So it was like he was my historian at that point. You know, I felt like I was carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Did I have all this power to be able to change the course of history? Could this single guy from Bayonne, New Jersey, change history by conveying a special message from Weitzman or trying to focus in? There were two parts of me. One is it's unbelievable that you're there in such a position. The second is I was trained as a lawyer to focus exactly what the issues were, not to get emotional about it, and to keep everybody out of it. And I was amazed and surprised that practically the whole White House staff, at least the political staff, were looking at me as a little bit of the savior, that I was the only guy who could save this. I'll never forget Bill Quandt telling me. And Quandt is sort of a cold Ivy League type guy working in the National Security Council, and a very distant type guy, not a buddy-buddy type, and telling me that the whole thing rests on my shoulders. I'm the only guy who can save it. It's a huge statement from him to tell me. Jody Powell has written a statement saying that there was a failure here. He's ready to go with it. And I was begging Lipschitz to ask the president to stay. I thought maybe if we had another 12 hours, maybe we could work out something. So I came up with ideas and different constructions, and I was writing, and then Lipschitz would type and give the memo to the president. We were fishing for ideas how to overcome the problems. But the basic thing is the responsibility thrust upon you out of nowhere, that maybe you can do something that saves this treaty, when this treaty maybe saves, who knows, thousands of lives. And the emotions involved. Why did that woman curse Carter? Why did this guy do that? And then the other part of me in the car is saying, focus, man, focus. Just keep focusing. So it was a bifurcation of me as a person, and the other part as a lawyer, trying to stay on target, and mainly a creative lawyer. And what went through my head is that I had a dean in my law school who used to say to me, the role of an attorney is that of a creative artist. So I was saying to myself, let's see if we can create tonight. Create. I go back to the hotel, and this was my own creation, I believe. I don't even think it was Weitzman's. I tell Lipschitz, look, the oil is not a big deal. They can contract to give us the oil. And that we need the American guarantee, because nobody trusted Egypt at that point. So if the American government can guarantee that we have oil at 25 a barrel, Israel would be secure in its oil production. And you have to go through guarantees. You got to go through Congress. Not the president says, I guarantee. You know, it's a congressional thing. There's a lot of stuff that goes on between what the president would like to do and what he's capable of doing in 5 minutes. And somehow it worked. And maybe he got something out of Sadat which made him comfortable, which he could tell Congress. I'm not clear how it happened, but that I remember the oil was a big issue at that point. everybody was downstairs except the president. All the aides were downstairs. Everybody was roaming around to see what would happen. The buzz came that the wheels were going up at 4 o'clock, which means the president was leaving. When the president leaves, the whole entourage goes. And people, I think Diane was meeting with Vance, that I remember, or something like that. Everybody was meeting and huddling and trying to move around. And I'm sure at that point everybody was creating a history of its own, saying that he or she had saved the day if the thing would happen. And, victory has many heroes, defeat has none. And there was a lot of tension. I mean, the whole world was watching. I mean, this was not just a prize fight between two people. This was the world. We're curious to see what's going to happen after the hash. We may have hashed potatoes, but if they were hashing it out, we didn't know, because Begin is a pretty obdurate guy too, and it wasn't easy to convince him. So Carter had to first work him over, and then he had to work Sadat over. I don't know what they talked about up there. I have no idea. I was tired. And there was a spotlight on me, and everybody wanted to know, and all the reporters were after me and asking me questions. And I was a wanted man. Everybody wanted to talk to me or be with me or hear what I had to say. I was the guy of the moment. People looking at me, asking me questions, patting me on the back. Leon, we know you can do it. Keep going. You've been great. You've been this. How's Azer? What's happening? General stuff. We're sitting around at the hotel. Lipschitz goes with, there's a big ceremony, and the president leaves. Everybody gives him a send-off, and he's on his way to Egypt. He went back to Egypt. And Lipschitz gets on the president's plane. He goes back with the president. And I'm alone in Israel. I'm probably with Weitzman. I don't remember where I was, waiting to see what would happen. It was really exciting. I mean, when we all found out that it was done. And I don't remember what we did right after that. Everybody probably got drunk, but I don't drink, so probably had a Diet Coke. Just the feeling of relief, exhilaration, the feeling that maybe a lot of people will save their lives. A lot of people won't get killed. I think people wanted to interview me a lot, talk to me a lot, and I didn't want to talk to the press at all. I had a lot of friends, but I didn't want to talk to them. And I think you go home and you think about what you've just done, and you get a sense of serenity that possibly you created or were part of a great event in history, which changed my life in a very unalterable way. I had a sense of serenity that I had done something for peace and changed the world a little bit. My guess is probably at the King David Hotel. I don't remember. But we were all watching television. Yeah, it was a very intense moment. I think I think we knew before he got on television that the deal was done. And I'm not sure if Azer told me or I told him or Lipschitz told me. I don't remember. But I remember getting the message that the deal is done. And the transformation in 24 hours from doomsday to a peace treaty was unbelievable, remarkable. Because the night before it looked dead. I distinctly remember Jimmy Breslin telling me that he believed that this thing was over. He's not the most knowledgeable guy in the world about the Middle East, and he was hanging out there trying to write stories. But the difference in 24 hours was incredible. And the fact that we made Carter stay another 12 hours, I'm sure it wasn't me alone, but I begged Lipschitz to try and implore Carter not to go. But I'm sure other people did also. And I met Carter probably on his own. But, the tension on him was tremendous. You leave the White House for 13 days, No president has ever done that. And you come back a failure. That's a horror film. So we made it. Abrasha Tamir, the general in charge of planning, said, he once said to me, if you were not there, we'd have to invent a guy like you. It's a confluence of events, you know, in the history, that I was at the moments where a character like me fit in, and somehow it worked. At that point, there was the inner satisfaction of having accomplished something huge, humongous in life. And very few people get the opportunity to do that. Very few. And especially a person like me who, you know, never went to John Hopkins School of Diplomacy, and, you know, did not train to be a diplomat. And I came outside the box. For a guy like me to get into such a role and to be acknowledged by the president, you know, when he autographed his book to me, he wrote, "To my fellow Middle East negotiator." If you look up the word fellow, it means co. Now, this was Carter's greatest achievement in his presidency, maybe in his life, and he was willing to share that with me. As I wrote in my book, that's tantamount to having 20 doctorates in political science or whatever you want. I mean, it's just a phenomenal event in one's life that he can talk about, and it's done. You know, it's irrevocable. So that gives you unbelievable satisfaction and a serenity that I told you about before. It totally changed, I think, my way of living. It gave me an inner spirit, I guess, that I felt every year after the Camp David, I go to Sinai and be a guest of the generals down there and look at the Sinai and know that there was no war there. I did that for about 5-10 years. Go to the desert, sleep there overnight, be a guest of the generals, and look at the sky, and it's a really spiritual experience. And to know that there's no battlefield, nobody's shooting, some kid's not killed, and, you know, people cry, it's a cold peace, a warm peace, take temperature, whatever you want. The peace treaty is held up. And as I said before, it even held up in Lebanon during '82. So you have a great feeling about it. And I don't think most people get that opportunity. I mean, people get it in science, people get it in different fields, but I feel it was a great opportunity. I don't know how it comes about, whether it's luck, whether it's smartness, whether it's charisma, whether it's the ability to communicate, whether it's creativity. There's no way to measure it. But you look at the fact, and the fact is that I did it. I was there, and the only one who needed to acknowledge me was the president, and he did it in a very gracious way. And Carter is very parsimonious about praise. And he was wonderful when I wrote my book. He opened the book party for me in Atlanta, Georgia, telling the audience that I possessed insights into foreign affairs and policy which very few others had, which was very nice. So I think you feel like you've contributed something. Everybody wanted to get to that ceremony, and now the protocol of the White House is diplomats first, you know, the Supreme Court, everybody wanted to be there. I had no official role, so no one knew where to put me. But before the signing, I was upstairs with Lipschitz in the White House, and everybody's calling me to get invited in there. And then we leave the White House, Bob Lipschitz's office, which is in the West Wing. And I said, you know, I'll see you later, Bob. I'm just going to hang out. I thought it was fun. And I tell the story in a book that a cameraman, one of these guys, was shoving a camera on my back, and he said to me, "Kid, get the hell out of the way. We want to get some important shots here." And I said, "Okay." It's fun. When you've done it and you know you've done it, you don't have to sit in the front seats. It's good to sit in the back and have fun. And then I was the only guy who could pass on other invitations to the Camp David dinner that night. This was the hottest ticket in the world. Everybody wanted to be there. So you don't need that. You don't need to sit in the front rows. It was fun, just roaming. And after the treaty was signed, Lipschitz gave me a pen, I think, which I lost, and Weitzman ordered a special pen for me and another something from Elon Tehila, the military secretary, who unfortunately is dead now. And he said, Leon's got enough mementos. What does he need it for? It's one of the most stupid statements in the history of the world, but so be it, you know. Weitzman wanted to do a lot to show how grateful he was, and Carter wrote me beautiful notes and letters. And look, I'm a paradox, because I wasn't part of the White House staff. I was a citizen advisor to the President of the United States. I wasn't part of the Israeli government. I was an advisor to a friend called Weitzman, who was the defense minister. And I wind up, if you want to call it a hero of Camp David or something like that, it's a hell of a ride. It's an experience. Well, obviously it feels good that the treaty is still holding up. I have a lot of Egyptian contacts. Nabil Osman is now the press secretary to Mubarak. Toured the country with me in '84. We had very good relationships. I've been invited to Egypt and been hosted over there. It feels great to know that we've done something like that. What I think will happen if people see this film, and I'm trying to be as humble and modest as I can. There'll be people who say they view history differently, and maybe Charney didn't do this or he did do that. I mean, I'm sure there'll be arrows shot at what we say in this film, because everybody will have a different idea, a different perception. So the only standard that we can go by is what President Carter said. Otherwise, I remember Secretary of Vance was a director of Manny Bank, and a friend of mine was President John Terrell, gave him a copy of my book. And Vance wrote back a note, I guess we all have a different view of history, because Vance wanted to probably think he was the major player. So, and maybe Bill Quant wrote a book that he was a major player. Maybe, whoever was over there, Muskie was involved for a while, and maybe he was a player. Maybe Jody Powell, Hamilton, I don't know. Everybody's going to have a different view of it. Had not Carter wrote those words to me, then I think a lot of people would take shots at what I'm saying to you tonight, because they'll give you a different vantage point. They'll tell me maybe it's not the way it really happened. Who knows? I tell you, history has a lot of different ways of people looking at it, and I think the only way I wouldn't do a film like this unless the president had authenticated my role in 3 words. Otherwise, I would not have done a film like that, because I know that people will have different ideas. Probably that we lost the opportunity to do something with the Palestinian issue when we could have possibly done something, at least brought it to the forefront. And this is why Weizmann quit the government. And that's one of the things that maybe we could have come. Today's world with Al Jazeera, internet, IPs, whatever you have, I believe it's very hard to make a political peace. I think, as I say many times on my TV show, that whatever happens with the clergy in the mosque on Friday and maybe the rabbis on Saturday really tell you what is going to happen in terms of bringing peace to the Middle East. And because communications are so quick, when Sadat ruled Egypt, he had an iron hand on Egypt. He was basically a dictator. You know, he wasn't democratically elected. He was a dictator. Begin had a coalition in his government, which he needed. And that coalition, which was the Daesh Party, had about 17 votes. And that coalition, at that time, could bring it together for Israel. Today, there's a lot of right-wing parties in Israel who don't even want to accept the idea, let's say, of a Palestinian state. And with all that goes on, I think it comes down to fundamentalist reading of books and how you read the Quran and how you read the Torah and how you read the various religious doctrines and books. And because there's so much anger and self-righteousness, I think it's a little bit harder. I think we were lucky. Welcome to another Leon Charney report. We're talking in the Knesset with Donny Otom. You remember his energy in the last interview we did with him. It was first time on his show, and he was a big hit. People really enjoyed him. Now, Donny Otom's former general in the Israeli Defense Forces, former chief of staff Ehud Barak, while he was a prime minister. Also, Donny was head of the Mossad, which everyone knows what it's all about. And now he's a political person sitting in the Knesset, part of the Labor Party, which seems a little bit discombobulated tonight, Donny. So we got 5 candidates running for the chairmanship. Why is it such a great job? Who wants to run so much for this?
Well, I think that once you enter into politics, everybody would like to be number one.
Right.
And in order to be a candidate of the party to the position of prime minister, you have firstly to go through the motion of being elected as the chairman of the party. So it is only natural that one day, even myself, I have an intention to run for that job. But I think that I would like till now to allow some others to have the stage.
So we have 5 candidates: Shimon Peres, Ehud Barak, Amir Peretz, Vilnai, and Fuad, I guess.
Yes, that's true.
Would you be happy with any of them?
Yeah, I support Barak, and I'm part of his team, as a matter of fact. Barak is the best of all the candidates. You know that we have to elect one of those that presented already their candidacy. Barak does not compete with Clinton, does not compete with Bush, doesn't compete with Putin. He competes with the other 4. And we have to choose the best one out of the 4, out of the 5. And I think that Barak is the best one.
Is it a real campaign, Donny? I mean,
well, it was a real campaign until recently. Now we have to review the list of voters due to some special circumstances. So instead of having the election on the 28th of June, it is postponed. Probably it will happen after the disengagement. Probably it will take place only at the end of this year, meaning November, December. Therefore, the campaign is now frozen, but it will restart, I assume, 2 months or 3 months before the new election day.
All right, you're happy with the disengagement plan?
Yes, I'm happy with the disengagement plan. I supported it from the beginning. I think that Barak and myself, when Barak still was a prime minister, at the last days of his previous position as prime minister, we were the first one to come publicly to the Israelis and tell them that due to the fact that then we did not have a partner and it was still Arafat, we offered and we suggest to take a unilateral step and to take care of our own interests and not to rely on the Palestinians to take care of our interests. Therefore, we came firstly with the idea of disengagement. I think that it
Those
was
were
better.
your words? Those were your words?
Yes,
Disengagement?
of course, disengagement. Those were our words.
Those were Barak's words.
Barak's words and my words. We thought, and I still think, that the best way, well, of course, the best is to try and to achieve peaceful solution with the Palestinians. Unfortunately, I don't see it realistic today. So the second priority is to disengage ourselves from the Palestinians, at least in the Gaza, and to do it in full cooperation with the Palestinians. But if there will be no full cooperation with the Palestinians, still to do it unilateral, it is better than to be stuck with this situation of today.
So you support Sharon totally on this?
Yeah, I support Sharon. I support Sharon, but only on this. And this was the only reason why the Labour Party entered into Sharon's coalition. You know that at the beginning of this session, we were, of the Knesset, we were the leading party of the opposition. But when Sharon came out with the idea of disengagement, we entered into the coalition. We are now part of his government in order to do this project. It is, according to my view, it is a one project government, which is to fulfill the disengagement. Once disengagement is accomplished, I think that we will have to get out of this coalition, and probably it will bring us to earlier election.
I have predicted, Donnie, and I did it with a show I did with Matan Vilnai, that the disengagement in terms of the IDF will go much more smoothly than the press reports. I think the army here is very strong, very capable of doing it. I don't see any civil war here, or I don't see any great rebellions. Do you?
No, I don't see any civil war, but I can see clashes. And I pray, believe me, with all my soul and all my heart, I pray that there will be no hostility, that there will be no violence. And it depends not only on the Israeli Defense Forces, because we don't want to use their force against the settlers. It first and foremost depends on the behavior of the settlers, and it first and foremost depend on the behavior of their leadership. As long as their leaders call them to resist, call them to take measures against disengagement, call them to block roads, etc., it deteriorates the situation. And it might bring us to a certain point where we will lose control. And this is my fear.
Really? You think that
Yes,
can happen?
it can happen. Therefore, what I did and still doing, I called upon the leadership of the settlers and the leadership of the right-wing political camp in Israel to stop all those calls for resistance, to stop their calls for disobedience in the military, disobedience in the military, and I think that they have to assume their responsibility in order to avoid any clashes, because you don't know how did it start, and how will it start, and you never know how will it
It's like
develop.
a fire.
Like
Now,
a
we had a very intelligent member of the Knesset that you would know very well. He's the former Surgeon General of Israel, of the IDF.
Yes.
Eldad.
Ari Eldad,
Right.
I know him very well.
sure
We are
you
good
do.
friends, but we...
What happens when you two guys talk? I mean, you're talking exactly the opposite of he is.
That's true, because it means that his view, his political view, is entirely different. Now, I don't
But
want
does
to
he
be
believe
his
in
advocate.
peace? Does he believe in peace?
No, he does not believe in peace. He does not believe in the Palestinians. He does not see the Palestinians as real partners, even not in the future. And this is the main difference between ourselves and themselves. I really think that finally, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe 5 years from now, we will strike a deal with the Palestinians, and we will bring an end to the hostilities, to the violence, and to the conflict. We want to seek end of conflict. Now, those who do not believe and have no trust in the Palestinians, legitimately so, say, you know, better do nothing with the Palestinians because they will never be partners. Now, those, as a matter of fact, call for the deterioration of the situation because only naives will think that this ceasefire, so to speak, between Abu Mazen and the Hamas will stay, will hold, if we will continue to be in the territories.
Here's a great question for you. Mubarak, I know, despised Arafat, and you can confirm it. Hafez al-Assad, the Syrian leader, didn't like Arafat. The Jordanian king didn't like Arafat. Do any of these people now get along better with Abbas than they did with Arafat? They do.
No doubt the answer is yes. Yes, they do. They do. They got much better with Abu Mazen. That's I know because, you know, it is not Arafat with the uniform and the posture of as if he never stopped to be a terrorist. This is a well educated man, Abu Mazen. He has a doctorate degree from
Moscow.
From the Lumumba University in Moscow.
Donnie, we're running out of time. Always a pleasure.
Always pleasure to me.
Stay strong.
Thank you very much.
من